All right, today we are going to talk about some finishing techniques. I have my chain fresh out of the pickle, and as we talked about before, just binding together the pieces that you're working on with a piece of wire so that you don't have to spend time getting all these little parts and pieces out of the pickle one by one is a good idea. Be careful when you wrap things, when you're drying them off out of the pickle in a paper towel. I've known some people over the years who've accidentally gone to clean up their bench and then thrown something of value away. So we're talking about sandpaper, and anytime we're in the studio, we really want to make sure that we label things, just so that if you tear a piece off, that you know what grit sandpaper. As you get more and more familiar, I think over the years, you will be able to just tell the difference. There's one more thing I want to grab. We also have the micro finishing sandpaper, and this comes in a variety of different grits that have different colors. And then the other thing I recommend is either a Pro Polish pad or a sunshine cloth. This is going to get you a higher shine. You don't ever want to polish chain on the polishing machine because it can get caught and pull your hand into the machine. I will do another video about how to polish using the flex shaft, and I'm going to put that in the tools to grow on file, just because not everybody in the class has one of these, but the longer that you're in the industry or have this as a hobby, this is a much faster tool. But I want to remind you that just doing it with sandpaper and a file is how people have done it for hundreds of years. It just takes time and patience. So the first thing that you're going to want to start out with is a half round file. I have a variety of sizes for getting into little itty bitty spots. So when we're finishing, typically I would not take this into a high shine until I was completely done with the chain. So I will file, I will sand up to about 400, but I might wait to do the 600 and the Pro Polish pad on my own. For the purpose of the video, just so that it's not super long, I'm going to do a little chain here. So whenever we're soldering, we always want to make sure that we use as little solder as possible while still sealing the seam. This has a little extra. I tried to put a little bit extra on for you guys just so that you can see why using something a little bit less is easier and faster over the long run. I'm making this chain out of oval links, so before I go ahead and finish it, I'm actually just going to bend it into shape. And I always want to make sure that the seam is not where I'm putting pressure on the tool. So I've just opened my chain nose pliers in there, and now I have a nice little seam. It also kind of work hardens it. I have started putting a texture into this chain using my chasing hammer. But I'm going to take my half round file, and I have a tiny little notch in my bench pin for jobs like this so that I can just hold it. So I'm going to start filing, and you'll notice I'm moving the file while I'm pushing it. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't actually want to put too much of a flat edge into it. I am actually going to hammer this chain. Oh, sorry. And it can be hard to find a position or an angle that works for you, but always brace your hand up against the bench pin, and that'll give you something to anchor yourself while you're moving the tool around. So once I've gotten it, most of it off, And you can see some of it's even climbed all the way up here. That's why when you're fluxing, I really only try to flux the seam because I don't want it going everywhere. So after that, I can start in on my coarsest sandpaper. And I like to wrap it around something, whether it be a chopstick or a toothbrush. Every time I go out to eat for takeout food, oops, that paintbrush broke. I just want something that's small enough. Here's a paintbrush that's actually made out of wood, not plastic, I think. So it's gonna fit in that hole. If I want to, I can also take a piece of tape and tape it on. A lot of you have sanding sticks, which are great, but they don't really get into little tiny holes. So still having sandpaper, I think, is pretty essential. Of course, I'm doing a mess of wrapping the tape, but there we go. So again, holding or bracing. And I'm working kind of omnidirectional because I don't really want to leave marks or drag marks. When I am moving the sandpaper across the surface, it's actually going to create lines in my metal, and it's not really easy to see because this is a rounded surface. But you just want to try to keep those coming from all directions, otherwise you'll have lines moving down your work. And it's important to work from coarse to fine. Now, if I'm doing a lot of these links, typically to save time, I'm not going to finish one link out at a time. I'm going to file all of them at the time so I'm not changing hands. When we work production and jewelry, you're sort of down to the wire seconds at a time, and so you just try to find the most efficient way to finish your stuff. But I want to finish out at least one link all on its own, just so you can see the different steps. So after I've gone 220, I'm gonna go 400, and I might take a couple couple paintbrushes or a couple chopsticks and just make little sanding sticks so they're all set up. So I've just rolled this little piece around with tape. And this is the link that I'm working on, so I can see my 220 marks. Now I'm going after it with 400. And I'm actually going to go all the way around now. And it's going to start taking off some of the copper residue that comes to the surface when we pickle. So you're just rotating the link as you finish it. And I didn't tape this down enough. Hold on one second. Ooh. There we go. So you're doing all of the outside and both of the sides. I'm not hitting it super long. I'm just trying to keep my sanding stick moving, so I'm not changing the shape. And again, while you're making these sanding sticks, if you're not familiar with the sandpaper, you might want to mark them with the Sharpie just so that you hold on, I'm running out of paintbrushes. Another thing is they do sell sanding sticks that are like this, that have grit on them already. But let me grab a little chopstick. So this is actually a Kite Spar, but you can get dowels, you can get, like this is a chopstick from a takeout container. So now I'm doing my 600. Oops. And you can also peel this back because we've wrapped it around several times. So you can peel it back as you go. Okay, so this is up to 600, so already it's looking brighter and smoother. I'm gonna hit it with the Pro Polish pad just so you can see what that looks like. And then also we'll do another one with the Sunshine Cloth. And so this, as you rub it, some of the tarnish is going to come off onto the Pro Polish pad and sort of turn it black. So don't be afraid. It's kind of like a magic eraser type feel. These sell these on Rio, and I will put a little link in one of the discussions. I'm going to start a discussion as well as files about. And same thing. You can actually roll this around a little stick, cut it, tape it, and then make a place to do it inside. But you can already see the difference, hold on, between the polish there. So here we have a link that we haven't done anything, and then there's the link that we've polished. So, and I haven't polished the inside, I just got the outside. But you can go up to 800 too with these. The micro finishing sandpaper comes in different grits. And the different grits are different colors, and there's a chart on Rio. I can also maybe publish that in the discussion as well. Another thing I wanted to talk about for polishing by hand is they sell brass brushes and Dawn dishwasher soap. So I'm going to do a little sample of that with one of these so that you can see what that looks like. And I'm not going to go through the whole process right now just because I'm still in the midst of making this chain. And like I said, each time we pickle it, it's going to raise the copper to the surface. But you can go ahead and just file all of the excess solder off. And if you want sort of a matte shine, an old toothbrush and what's the word? Toothpaste will work too, or cream of tartar. So just regular Dawn dishwashing soap. And what the dishwashing soap does is it acts as a surfactant. So it keeps it nice and lubricated while you're using this coarse brass brush. Or, I mean, you could use a fine brass brush too, but. And this isn't a high shine, but really to get a high shine, I would use a machine finish. which I am going to do a video on using the tumbler and the tools to grow on. I didn't want to force everybody to buy, you know, thousands of dollars of tools if they aren't interested. So taking an intro course, just using the tools that you have at home and making it work until you really know that you like it. And I would of course do this in running water that isn't freezing cold, but again, you can see a nice shine forming. The solder's still on there, but I haven't gone through all the steps. Ooh. Get that out of the way. So that is the brass brush and just Dawn dishwashing soap. But again, filing to make sure. Ooh. Sorry, I have a little Sharpie on my hands. And the file really only works on the push motion. We want to be careful to not put too much texture into this as well, because with the file it's going to take a lot more than the sandpaper away, which is going to make it easier to do, but it also changed the shape a little bit. If it gets too misshapen, remember you can always take your hammer, and as I pull away, I'm careful also to not hammer the edge of the face on the side. And I'm keeping my fingers out of the way. I just hammer one side, turn, hammer another side. And especially over the seam, I'm gonna not hit quite as hard. If I want a textured effect, I'm gonna flip over the hammer and use the little back side of my chasing hammer. This is gonna give it a doppled, sort of the face of the moon texture. I love this texture. And you can see this sort of mediates the seam. Oh, and I went ahead and showed you that before I had finished out with the sandpaper. When I use the sandpaper, it's going to take some of that texture off, but I can always go back and hammer it again. When I texture my chain, I don't tend to texture both sides, because once you hammer one side, if you turn it over and hammer it on the other side, it just sort of flattens out the texture on one side, and it overworks the metal. So I like to only finish to put this hammered texture with the back of the chasing hammer on one side, just because it gives it a little flash. It also, hitting it with this polished surface makes it shinier. So I did the 220. I'm going to step forward to the 400. And I would wait again to do the Pro Polish and the 600 until I have finished my entire chain, because then I can just go down the line. And stacking your habits is always going to make it faster. So I'm using the flat, I don't know if I said that, the flat side of the half round file. And this is why we really want to cut our pallions pretty small. I use about 1/2 millimeter, and the reason being, it's easy to go back in and add more solder later if we didn't fill the seam completely, but it is just kind of a lot of work to clean up these rings. And as you get started, it's hard to see the pallions, so you tend to cut them a little bit bigger, but that's why I prefer using chip solder, because it's easy to control the amount with the wire solder, as well as the what is that stuff, paste solder. It tends to go on kind of gloopy, and if you overdo it, you can really overdo it super quickly. And if this is getting hard for you to hold, a tool that I recommend investing in is something called a ring clamp. So it has a little wedge, and you can just put your piece in the ring clamp and then just put the wedge in there, and then it's just easier. This is easier to hold, and you can get at it from a variety of angles. You can even use it to hold while you're sanding. You can't really hold it while you are sanding the inside, but and I'm holding the link and wiggling the sandpaper. You can go back and forth as well. And with your first chain, I would spend as much time as you can, but it's good to just keep practicing. So through the course of this class, I would really focus my skills on soldering. You can spend time after class during the holiday break finishing if you don't get it all done. But at least removing it down to this. You can do them as you go in groups of 3, 2. So now that I've finished this link, I'm going to use my sunshine cloth. Oh, I could hit it with 600, but I want you to see just really how shiny this gets it. And again, it's kind of omnidirectional, but you can see the tarnish start to come off there. And again, if your hands start hurting while you're doing this, just take a break. So here we have the, wait, where did that Pro Polish pad go? Pro Polish pad. This one has just been hammered, and then this has the sunshine cloth. So these are great. With the micro finishing sandpaper, you would start with the green, which is kind of this green gray color. Then you would step to the gray, and then you would go up. So this is 400, this is 600. And the nice thing about the micro finishing sandpaper, as opposed to little particles of sand that are often, you know, they try to make them uniform, but even within a piece of 220, you might have something that's a more coarse grit, just because it's really hard to get particles of sand all evenly to the same level, and then it fix it evenly on the paper. This micro finishing sandpaper is like a fiber based. It's made by 3M, and so when you're sanding, it's a much smoother, even sand because the particles are not there. And if you are not doing really well with using the file without beveling your chain too much, you can just sand it all off. It just takes a little bit longer. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to make another video probably this weekend about how to use the tumbler, the rock tumbler. Instead of a rock tumbling solution, which is kind of like a sandy grit, you actually use Steel Shot and Dawn dishwashing detergents and some water. But I will make a video of that and then post a picture of what it looks like after it's done. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks, bye!